the recording now. Perfect. It's started. So thank you guys for joining this call about the Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Grant office hours for the Southern Oregon region. Of course, we are happy to welcome anyone from any area that across the state that has questions, and this could meet their time frame. So as I mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded. While I go through this quick presentation, please feel free to throw your email in the chat. I'll be sending a couple of items out after the call today, as well as subscribing you guys to the listserv for the RFSI, or Resilient Food Systems Grant. This presentation is only going to take a few minutes, and then we'll pop over to questions. And hopefully you all have had a chance to review some of the information on our website and or watch the training video that is available. If you haven't, that's going to be your greatest source of information, is the YouTube video that our department has put together. It's about an hour and a half long. The first 30 to 45 minutes is really about the program, and the last hour is walking you through both applications and how to submit them. So to get started on the Resilient Food Systems today, we're going to go over 4 things, and then we will have questions and answers. So the first, we're going to take a look at what RFSI is at a national level. We'll look at Oregon's program, take a look at the timeline, and then what the application process looks like. So what is Resilient Food Systems, or RFSI? Essentially, the purpose of this program is to rebuild the middle of the supply chain, strengthen local and regional food systems. And these funds really started when, during COVID, we saw that a lot of our grocery store shelves were bare because of COVID shutting basically the world down. So USDA, in Rescue Act, the American Rescue Act dollars, decided to put some aside to really address building supply chain resilience. So these funds are intended to support capacity building, aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storing, transporting, wholesaling, and distribution of local and regionally produced food products for, again, the middle of the supply chain. So we're not looking for projects that deal with harvest or anything basically pre-farm gate, but everything after after harvest, when processing begins, to essentially marketing in the last customer, the customer who's going, consumer that's going to use it. So pretty much anything in between, processing, wholesaling, distributing, aggregation of products, those types of things are what this program is focused on. So allowable crops are specialty crops, which are fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, horticulture, nursery, and herbs, but they have to be for human consumption. Dairy, grains for human consumption, aquaculture, and other food products. This excludes meat and poultry. It also excludes wild-caught seafood, but aquaculture by USDA definition, as long as the seafood has had some part of their life cycle farmed, essentially, some part of their life cycle controlled, then they would be considered an aquaculture item rather than a wild caught seafood. So if you have more questions about that, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Included in specialty crops are honey as well. I've gotten a few questions about that. But all of this is for human consumption. So this is not for grains that are raised for livestock production or anything else, but really truly for middle of the supply chain, food chain, and building resilience there. Pretty much anyone is eligible for an entity. So agricultural producers, processors, groups of producers and processors, nonprofit organizations, local governments, tribal governments, institutions, universities, and so on, again, that are all within the middle of the supply chain. So making sure that that is what you hit is going to be key in this program. So within the program, there are 2 tracks. And again, this is at a national level. Oregon is also using these 2 tracks, but everything I've talked about so far is for all 50 states and territories that are receiving these dollars. So infrastructure grants are anywhere from $100,000 to $2 million. It's a 3-year grant period. And there's a 25% or a 50% matching requirement. I'll go over that in a minute, how you decide if you're 25% or if you're 50%. And again, it must expand the capacity for the middle of the supply chain. The other side of this is the equipment only track. So those are grants anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000. They must be purchased and received within 1 year of the grant award. And no matching is required for this program. But again, it has to be the middle of the supply chain. Both of these tracks, everything that I've talked to up until this point is required for both of them. So middle of the supply chain, it has to be eligible products and it has to be eligible entities in order to even apply to either of these. The equipment only is really what it states, equipment only. So this is if you're going out and just purchasing a cooler. You already have all of the other work done to put the cooler in, and you just need the cooler itself purchased. That would be an equipment only project. If you need to buy the cooler and you need to add, let's say, plumbing and electric and a few other items in order to even install the cooler, that would automatically move it to an infrastructure project. So please note that the two applications for them are very different. So we need to make sure that you are applying using the correct application to the correct program. If you have any questions about that, please reach out. So, as I mentioned, everything up until this point is national level, will apply to all 50 states. This is Oregon's RFSI grant program. So, of course, we're still going to use the two tracks that I just talked about. But we have an advisory committee of 15 members that represent a cross section of the agricultural community that could apply to this program. That advisory committee is going to do the review on these grants, which I will talk about in a minute. But Oregon received $5.9 million in funding, and based on a industry-wide survey that we put out about this program, the breakdown of that funding is going to go $2.8 million to the infrastructure track, $1.2 million to the equipment track, and $1 million is going to go to state-led infrastructure project. This is not going to be any hard infrastructure. This is going to be, training and outreach and so on. The remaining dollars that are available out of that 5.9 is for the department to actually manage the grant itself. Again, this breakdown was informed by an industry-wide survey. So as you saw earlier, the infrastructure grants can be up to $2 million requested, but we only have $2.8 million to give out. So please note, as you are applying, apply for the amount that makes sense for your program, but just note that we only have $2.8 million available. If you request $2 million, you most likely will not get that amount of funding because we are limited with how much we have available. As I mentioned earlier, I would talk about what distinguishes the 25% match versus 50% match. Based on USDA requirements, the 25% match is what we call a graduated match. If you meet one of these prioritized areas, if you're a small or underserved business owner, historically underserved farmer or rancher, or another business that qualifies under the Small Business Administration categories, a small disadvantaged business, women-owned small business, or a veteran-owned small business, if you meet any of those priority areas, you are automatically able to receive 25% match rather than the 50% match. Essentially, your matching is a requirement for the infrastructure side, but not for the equipment side. So if you have any questions about this, please let us know and I can help you figure out where you fit in all of that. But I will also provide you guys a link to the Small Business Administration website so you can look at their definitions and see if you qualify. So here are the priorities for the grant. I'm not going to read these to you guys because they are available on our website as well as on the application on the RFA. And I talk them through thoroughly in the webinar series that we posted for this grant. Essentially, these are the priorities that USDA created for this program. They were also informed by the industry-wide survey we provided earlier that I talked about. The only one that I do want to point out is the last one on this list is other goals identified by the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. The Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center is a part of a USDA program for food business centers across the nation. Essentially, these food business centers are there to perform technical activities for the people in their region, the agricultural businesses in their region. Ours is the Northwest Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. They have goals stated on their website, which I will show you in a minute, that if your program meets one of their goals as well as one of these other priorities, you can mark it in your application that you meet one of their priority areas. This is just a way to have USDA understand that their programs are working together and across their program areas. So this is just something to note. Again, I will show you the Rocky Mountain website in a second. These are the priorities for equipment. Same thing applies to the last one, but please make sure that you read through these. Next, we're going to go over the timeline really quickly. The infrastructure grants are currently open and accepting applications and will close the end of February, so February 29th, 2024 at noon. We anticipate a number of applications to this program. So if you turn your application in at 1 o'clock on February 29th, it will get disallowed and you will not be considered submitted. That is in case, unless something happens with our website and we're completely have some issues there. But please make sure that you turn your application in on time and it is filled out correctly. So if you don't, if you think that you meet the 25% match, but in reality you need to do the 50% match, and you only provide us with 25% match, your program, your project may be disallowed because you did not meet the match requirement. So there are certain things like that that I suggest that you reach out and talk to us if you have any questions on prior to submitting an application. The equipment grant will open February 1st and will close the same day as infrastructure, February 29th at noon. And this essentially means that the application will become available February 1st, as well as our request for application document will be posted on our website. After that, the applications will go to the advisory committee that I spoke about earlier, the first part of March. They will review it during March. We will come together and talk about the applications in April, and hopefully by the first week of May, applicants will be notified as to whether or not they received funding. From the month of May, we will review the applications and do a edit to them for USDA by the end of May. We anticipate the projects will be able to get funding in August, but it all depends on how quickly the USDA reviews the applications. It could be as early as June getting dollars, but it could be as late as October. Again, it all depends on how quickly the USDA reviews these applications and gets them back to us. However, the end date of these grants will be January 1st, 2027. I apologize, my dog is barking. So the application process. It is a 3-stage application process. First, you will be reviewed for allowability, completeness, and feasibility by program staff. Essentially what this means is your application will get looked at and said, do you qualify? Are you using the right crops? Is your project even something that we can fund? Did you provide everything that we requested? Pretty straightforward. From there, the advisory committee will review the programs based on the score sheets that are currently available on our website on the last couple of pages of the request for applications document. I suggest reviewing those just so you know what you're getting scored on and how our score sheets work. Lastly, the ODA leadership will use the advisory committee score sheets, the comments from the advisory committee, as well as comments from program staff and several other factors such as crops being affected, location in the state, number of beneficiaries to select the projects to move forward for the USDA review. And that's the application steps. Required documents for both infrastructure and equipment. There's a cover page and an application. These are written by USDA, so we really didn't have much of a say over them. But essentially, the cover page is meant to identify who you are, who is wanting the dollars, name, location, contact, that type of stuff. Then comes the application itself. So this is where you'll actually discuss, what your project is doing. All of a breakdown of the application, as mentioned earlier, is on the YouTube video application training, which I will give you guys a link to later. You are required 2 attachments in the infrastructure side of things. Attachment A, which is critical resources infrastructure letter. So essentially this letter basically states that, let's say, for example, you're putting in cold storage. I'll use the one I used earlier, cold storage into a facility, but you don't actually own the facility, you rent the facility. So the critical resource and infrastructure letter basically tells us that the person who owns the facility is going to rent to you for the life of the grant. That way we know that the cooler is going into a location where it will stay for the period of 3 years. The matching funds verification letter, well, you'll need the critical resource letter for both equipment and infrastructure potentially. The attachment B, matching funds verification, tells us that your matching funds are verified and that they are available to us, because you need matching funds to be approved and secured prior to actually applying to the grant. So that means if you're going to have any in-kind donation from, let's say, an electrician, they need to sign and date and fill out the matching funds verification letter prior to you even applying to the grant itself. So please make sure that you review those documents. Like I said, I go into very critical detail on both of those documents in the YouTube video that's available on our website. Lastly, here's our email. I will also put my direct line in the chat for you guys to have access to that. But this is the email. So feel free to reach out at any point with any questions, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. All of that being said, I assume there are questions, so feel free to unmute yourself or throw a question in the chat and I will answer it.
I have a question, and sorry, my internet keeps going out, so I think I joined this meeting like 20 times. But if we're applying for a specialty crop block grant too, should we, is there a benefit to apply, like taking any equipment needs out of that and applying to this instead? Or should we, if it's within a certain, like, does it make sense to apply to both or not?
No. Erin, it makes sense to do whatever your program actually needs. Okay. So specialty crop in this program have very different requirements, but also focuses, however you say that. So specialty crop is to increase the competitiveness of those crops for an industry-wide work. This program is really to build the middle of the supply chain resilience for whatever crop you're working with. So they have different focuses, and specialty crop, yes, allows equipment, but this is like regular purpose equipment is allowed in this program, whereas that's not allowed in specialty crop. Specialty crop is specialty purpose equipment only. Additionally, if let's say you get a specialty crop and an RFSI, they cannot be brought as match to each other because they're both federal funds. So you wouldn't be allowed to bring them as match and use them. You can use them concurrently, but you can't use them as matching funds for either one. So I would say do whatever feels best and will work best for you. So also whatever project is going to be doing the work that needs the equipment should be asking for the equipment.
Thank you.
Sure. There's a question in the chat. Does the infrastructure grant have to be $100,000 minimum total cost, or can it be below? So the request has to be $100,000 or more. The total cost cannot be below 100,000 because that does not meet the program scope. And it's actually what you are requesting from the USDA or from this grant program has to be 100,000. So that does not, let's say, for example, what you're requesting from the grant is $100,000 and you qualify for the 25% graduated match. That means that the total project cost is $125,000. Shay, can we request more than one project on the $100,000 request? Yes, you can request more than one. I would not suggest that you request, 4 or 5. You can only receive funding from either the infrastructure or the equipment, and you cannot receive multiple grants. So I would say put your focus in one or maybe 2 grants. One on each track would be fine. I don't want you guys to waste your time applying 6 different applications because the applications are fairly long. And then us not even fund one of them. So I would say do 1, maybe 2 applications at maximum, and then really focus on, I would say, one of them. Samuel, I posted the email in chat for you. Martin, can we exclude installation costs from an application for the equipment grant only? You're required. I don't quite understand that question. I just want to make sure. So the equipment only grant is what it says, only for equipment. You cannot add installation of that piece of equipment onto that grant. If you do need installation, it becomes an infrastructure grant request. So you would have to exclude installation from an equipment grant ask. Shay, can you clarify your question a little bit more? Shay asked, would this interfere with any other grant besides the 2 mentioned here? What do you mean by that? No. So this grant, Shay asked, she's applying, or they are asking, they're applying to a local county grant, and if this grant would interfere with those grants. No. So you can bring state or local dollars as matching funds to this grant. You can't bring other federal dollars as matching funds, but state and local ones are fine. I would suggest looking for other grants so it reduces the matching that you have to provide. Kathleen asked, is there a percentage required for the match between cash or in kind? No. So you can have all cash, you can have all in kind. It just depends on what you're able to bring to the table. Is there a benefit if several community partners within the region apply together under one application? There is a question on the score sheet that asks about the beneficiaries, but I do not believe you don't get any more points for partnering with any more organizations. However, it is something that we do encourage because, as I mentioned earlier, we only have $2.8 million available for infrastructure. That's only going to go so far. If somebody puts in an application for a food hub for an entire region, that application is going to potentially rank higher because it has more beneficiaries. It meets an entire region's needs. It does a few other things than, say, a single project for a single entity needing a warehouse. So just note that we do encourage you to work with those around you to just make sure that the resources are spread to the best of their ability. Can a for-profit food hub apply? Yes. So Shay asked why somebody would apply for more than one grant within this program. Why don't they just combine the request? So Shay, they could be requesting for several different projects that don't necessarily mesh together. For example, they could be requesting for a new processing line to sort, let's say, apples to a smaller size so that they can sell to schools around them more easily because they have now the smaller size available for like little kids. But then they also may need, let's say, cold storage for dairy products that they are aggregating and processing and distributing to a completely different set of consumers. So for that, that would be two different infrastructure projects. One's putting in a processing line, one's doing a cold storage, and neither of them meet. If there was something like they were putting in a processing line for apples, but they also needed cold storage for those apples, you would combine that into one application and say, you know, we want a cold storage and a processing line. Hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Okay, so they can submit more than one infrastructure proposal as long as they fall under the maximum, and you may deny any one and may not approve any. Correct. So you can submit more than one infrastructure proposal. We don't recommend it. It's much better to put your energy, focus, and engagement on one application, possibly two, especially if you're trying to apply for infrastructure and equipment, that two applications is fine. But again, you can only receive funding from one of the tracks, and we will only be funding one of your projects at maximum. So if you put 5 applications in, you may not get any of them, but at maximum, you would get one. Hopefully that helps. Go for it, Kathleen.
Hold on. Yeah. You can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to explain this. Can you apply for an equipment grant and the equipment be all of the pieces required for a particular system, like a processing line or a packaging line or something like that? Not the install, but all the pieces.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as long as it falls underneath the $100,000 limit. So one thing that I haven't mentioned up until this point, you can request equipment within the infrastructure grant. So let's say your piece of equipment that you want is $250,000. You would need to apply to the infrastructure side of things for that piece of equipment and, let's say, installation and training of staff on how to clean it and manage it and do all of that. All of that type of stuff is fine. Again, you'll only ever get one request funded. So if you go out and fill out an infrastructure grant and an equipment grant, and your equipment grant is required to do your infrastructure grant, then we won't fund both of them, but we might say, hey, you need to put your equipment in the infrastructure grant and fund that one. Hopefully that helps. I know it's a lot of information, guys. I apologize. We try to make it digestible, but while there's kind of a lull in questions, I want to show you guys a few things. So the first is a document I'm going to be sending out to you after this meeting ends. And it's just a set of links that will help you throughout your application process. So to start, it gives you my contact information right here. So the email again, my work at phone, office line, and cell phone. But the second part of this document is 7 links. So the first link is the main RFSI website here. I'll show you guys that in a second. The second is the link to the request for applications document. This request for applications document essentially is everything that I've given you today, plus whatever I said in the webinar, just in a written form. We understand that some people don't listen as well as they read, or read better than they listen, however, learn better than they listen. So we provided it in written form. There's also a Spanish and a Swahili version of this available on our website. The third link is the application training video that I've talked your ear off about. Please, 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 please go and watch that. It will be extremely helpful to you. On the right-hand side, starting from the top, is the USDA's list of FAQs that will apply to you guys. So things like what qualifies wild-caught seafood or farm-raised seafood, what defines the middle of the supply chain, those types of things can be found on the FAQs. The next section is registering for a unique entity identifier, or a UEI. Every entity who applies must have a UEI by the time they receive funds or by the time the application goes to the USDA. So by the end of May. Please, if you plan on applying, start this process sooner rather than later. You don't need a registered UEI, you just need a regular one. A registered one essentially means that you want to get dollars directly from the federal government, whereas a regular one, you can get dollars from pass-through entities like us, Department of Agriculture. The third link here is the Small Business Administration definitions I talked about earlier. That's going to be super helpful. And the last link is the Rocky Mountain Food Business Center link. So, as I mentioned, I will go ahead and send this out after our meeting. So you guys will have access to that, to all of the emails that were put in the chat. So Samuel, okay, perfect. I will send it out. Make sure that if you joined our chat late, throw your email in there, and I will go ahead and subscribe you to the listserv. That's where we'll send out all of our press releases, as well as I'll send you this document and a couple other links. Great. The next thing that I want to show you guys, while there's not a lot of questions going on, okay, there we go, is the website. So hopefully you guys have already seen this, spent some time here. If not, please do. This is going to be extremely helpful to you throughout the application process. To start, it just kind of talks about what the program is. But here's a link to the application training video. Woo, it's there again. It talks about the two types of projects, eligible products, eligible organizations, and some exclusions from the grant. So the next section's timeline. Again, here is several recordings of essentially these office hours or presentations we've done about the RFSI. Feel free to watch them. Our recording will go right here under the January 10th. So it will be available once you guys, once our team uploads it, but it will be available to you to review. Next, it talks about the infrastructure grant and the equipment grant in those two separate timelines. Again, here's the application training video for applicants. Please, please, please use it. The main thing I want to point out on our website is our resources section. The first link is the FAQs, which again is in that document that I will send out to you guys later today. The second set is the request for applications, as I mentioned, in English, Spanish, and Swahili. The application training video, look at that, it's a third one. Please use it. The next three links are your template for the application, attachment A, the critical resource letter, and attachment B, matching funds. Now, if you click the application template, you will get an error message. This is because the application is a dynamic form. You will want to actually click download over here, your little download icon, and you will want to actually open it as a PDF document in Adobe. If you try to open it back in your Word or on your web, it will not actually open. So you need to go on and open it in PDF Adobe. But this is what the proposal template will look like when you open it. The application, as I mentioned earlier, I go line by line, section by section to help you fill this all out. In the application training video, it's about 12 pages, so please feel free to look at that. Again, you can't fill it out on the web, you have to download it. The other two attachments are fillable on the web, and then you can download them as you filled them out. So all of the items would stay there, or you can download them, fill them out, and then go from there. This is attachment A, critical resources, and then this is attachment B, matching funds. They look very similar. The next one is the UEI link, and then the remaining links are just more informational items that could be helpful to you as you apply. All right, more questions. Samuel, glad you grabbed that. Okay, yes, so you need to open it, download it, and then open it outside of the web to actually receive and look at the application. You can't fill it out online. It's unfortunate, but USDA made it a dynamic template. So essentially, as you type, it grows, and that is not supported by web browsers. All right, I'm hearing no questions and not seeing any typing dots down there. Again, feel free to reach out to us. The Resilient Food Systems email is watched by several of our staff members, so you should get a reply in 24, 48 hours. Feel free to reach out to me, give me a call, shoot me an email. My number is in the chat, but it's also on our website and several documents. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon. I appreciate your time and interest in the program. And feel free to reach out with more questions. Thanks, everybody.